magic in Warhammer Universe is unlike any other. It is not generated by wizards or witches or shamans, really, or whatever. It's rather a fluent stream of energy. It's like a wind. It originates from the Chaos Rifts, and since we know that Chaos is home to demons, evil gods, and all the bad stuff, um, since the environment where the source of magic comes from is that evil, we know it's gonna be chaotic and dangerous and bad and probably powerful. We call this wind Dar. It's the mainstream, like the main river, mainstream of magic. It's like I said, it's really powerful and it's really dangerous, but it somehow splits into smaller streams, 8 of them. They're much weaker, but they're much easier to not really control, but to take energy from. It's the best comparison is like lightning is extremely powerful and it has a lot of energy, and if we could harvest it, we would get so much from it. But we can only harvest the smaller sources of energy, so we cannot really harvest lightning yet. So in the same way, the 8 smaller winds of magic, because they're called winds of magic in Warhammer Universe, they are much easier to not control, like I said, to get energy from. There's obviously certain wizards that are powerful enough. These includes high elves who are immortal, ancient, and they practiced magic for a long time. Their sorcerers and sorceresses can use the energy of the mainstream of magic, and so can Slan, which is pretty much is the leader of lizardmen, of the lizard people who also are pretty good with magic. And Slan is obviously ancient, so that's another thing that shows requires a lot of time and practice to to control the mainstream. And the way it works for them, for those more powerful ones, is they don't really go straight to the source wind, to Dar, but they rather take all 8 of them and weave them back together to move them into much more controlled environment. They are much smoother, much safer, but still as powerful. The problem is that the winds, if they're not, even if they are under the influence of the very powerful magicians of any sort, they are very unpredictable. They can suddenly turn, because if you imagine there is a wind blowing in a normal atmosphere, it will be blowing a certain way depending on whatever, on the weather. It will just blow in a certain direction and then it will slowly change. How it works in here is like you've got it going straight forward, and then it takes a 90-degree turn and the streams change. So you've got a stream that feels the magic of fire, and then randomly it just becomes extremely weak, and the shadow, the one that feels shadow, gets much stronger. So there's a sudden change, and if there's a battle of sorcerers, it will shift the tides like instantly. And if you're halfway through casting a spell, it might even kill you. Like, that's the way it works. It's sudden, it's dangerous, but it's extremely powerful, and it scares the shit out of people. There's really terrible consequences if you fuck up your spell. Like, wizards can literally be torn apart, they can get blinded, they can lose their magical abilities, they can destroy magical abilities of everybody around them, or even further, or whatever. It can just kill the entire army, he can just cause massive explosion. They can even blow up cities. That's why people are scared of them, because inexperienced magician, if he's going to try and cast a much more powerful spell that he can control, he can destroy everything, entire city. He can just burn it down or whatever. I already mentioned that the main magic wind is called Dar, and it's split into 8 smaller streams, and each of them is responsible for their own lore. Each has a different name and a different use, obviously. Most races, so humans, elves, even chaos, I think, all the civilized races, that's what you can call it, they acknowledge the 8 different winds, the 8 different schools. There's obviously exceptions. For example, vampires. Vampire counts use their own magic. It's play on a magic of death and necromancy. And there's also Skaven, who are the Ratmen, and they don't really source their magic from winds of magic as much as they use warpstone, which is I'll make a video on what warpstone is, since it's pretty important for Skavens, and I'll just talk about it in another video. But it's pretty much a green glowing meteorite that has magical essence that's extremely toxic, but they love it. They eat it. The Graciers, which is their shamans, the highly respected, smarter rats, are using their knowledge to control the stupid rats, pretty much the entire hordes, and they know that warpstone gives them energy, so they eat it to gain power. But it slowly kills them and drives them mad, and it is a really interesting story. I'll touch on that too, and that's what I can think of from the top of my head. Because I think Skaven specialize in the magic, plague magic, and destruction magic. It's basically very similar to Nurgle, which I'll talk about later in the video. And Nurgle magic is basically, disease and all that nasty stuff, and Skaven love it because they can kill humans with it. And since Skaven live in the undergrounds of the huge human cities, it's really useful for them, as you can imagine. And they also, as I said, power up their machines. Like, they've got warp cannons and all that shit, and that's really powerful, but obviously very dangerous. It's like a spin of dwarven technology, but it's Skaven technology. So going back to the winds, there's 8 of them. Main is called Dar. Dhar, as I said, Dar. It splits to 8 small ones. First of them is called Hish, or Haish, or whatever. I think it's called Hish. That's how it's supposed to pronounce it, I think. And is responsible for the Lore of Light. It's nothing special, really. It's like a signature magic of the good guys, like the Bretonnian, the Paladins, all that shit. And it is used to destroy tainted creatures. So, tainted creatures in Warhammer Universe will be everything that's unclean and, all the heresy, undead, demons. And it has a very Egyptian flavor to it, since the usual gear of a sorcerer of light is pharaoh-like headwear, like the tall hat. They have the staff with like a cobra head, and they've got white robes with all the golden lining, and they're like the shining point of an army if you see them standing around. So they're like the inspiring point for the units, and it pretty much it's meant to shy away all the uncleanness. What else can I say? Yeah, they basically, what they do, they buff up friendly units to be better against undead, and it directly kills the undead as well. It just makes you better against them and demons and whatever. But yeah, that's really about it. And there's also the second wing called the Wind of Chamon or Shamon. I don't really know how to pronounce those, but you probably figured out, or it doesn't even matter to you. You probably forget those. And it's responsible for Lore of Metal. That's one of the most powerful ones. It's basically extremely powerful alchemy, which is used to combat the enemy, obviously. It's one of my favorite winds of magic in the tabletop Warhammer, since it's used to deal with heavily armored opponents. It's been used against me multiple times when I bought my Chaos Army, and then I wish I never did, because basically what it does, it controls metal. Obviously, the Lore of Metal, right? So imagine you have a heavily armored Chaos Warrior, which has armored horse, heavy armor that's heavier than fucking half of the regiment, and he rides to you, and what the metal mage does is transforms the metal to either squish him like fucking Magneto, or heats it up until it's white, and the guy inside melts or gets a massive burns and barely survives, or It can even, I don't know, it can even rust the metal off to the point where it will just fall off your body. So, if you've seen any Total War videos from the Warhammer section, imagine, what's it called? Imagine a dwarven army walking to you, the hammerers, heavy armor, long beards, and heavy weapons. And right before they get to you, they walk to you basically in their underwear. They have nothing. They'll just get torn apart. And that's literally how the magic works. I'm not sure. I don't think it'll be brought into Warhammer. I think there will be mainly be the fire magic because it's the most iconic one. But this would be amazing. Just imagine if you can permanently tame the enemy unit like that. I suppose it's hard from the balance point of view, but there is a counter magic as well. So I'll talk about it as well. Third Wind is called Giran or Gyran. It's a lore of life. It's what you will expect. It's a druid's lore, like from World of Warcraft or whatever. It's based on healing, buffing allies, and reviving allies. Basically, a healer. It can make your mediocre unit, that's how you say it, right? Into an unkillable juggernaut. That will literally tear through enemy lines, regenerating wounds, dealing shitloads of damage to everybody around it. And if you manage to kill it somehow, then the sorcerer can just revive it again. It's not easy. You have to. There's a lot of RNG involved with throwing dice, and you can kill yourself doing that. But it's generally not that hard. There's always risk involved with magic, and that's the main focus point. As I said, the winds change constantly, and they're extremely dangerous. So every time you cast any magic, you can fuck yourself up. But it's very useful, so you have to attempt to do it. So, compared to some other lores, it might sound boring, but it's like a consistent pain in the ass. Because, just imagine, if you ever played Total War Rome or any other ones, whatever, you get those basic cheap units or Total War Arena. Imagine the tier 1 shitty units against like tier 6 or 7 legionnaires, heavy legionnaires. You can buff up your tier 1 shitty units, even barbarian units, so they can easily deal with the tier 7 legionnaires. That's ridiculous, isn't it? But that's basically the way it works. I don't think it'll be added. Maybe some small heals, mixed in, but that's like a really powerful magic. But it's druids. Like, who the fuck cares about druids? Fourth of the Winds is Azir. I think it's Azir because it's gonna be like Egyptian theme, whatever. Is the lore of heavens. It sounds amazing because lore of heavens. The possibilities can be endless, but it's actually not very special. You end up controlling the skies, basically. So you control the wind, you control, like, lightning, you can call down lightning like fucking Zeus. And you can... There's actually one very cool thing in the tabletop Warhammer, and it will be amazing if they brought it to Total War Warhammer. Because imagine you can call down a comet, like an actual comet. Not too big, but the size of a small house, actually, yeah. So, yeah, it's pretty big. The way it works is you call it down in a certain area and it comes after a delay. It's obviously all dice RNG based. But the longer it takes to come down, the stronger it hits. So imagine if it comes down and you create a zone with it. So I don't want my enemy to go in there, so I'm calling down a comet in there. And he can take a risk to go in and it doesn't come down in this turn and he gets through. But if he doesn't, it will just fuck up everything that's underneath. There's no chance of anything surviving. It will just come down and crush it. Done. That's literally it. But that's a really, really hard to cast spell. It's really hard to hit. And it's a lot of RNG based. And if it scatters away too far, you can fuck up your own army. But, the effects are incredible. It's really fun. A lot of Lizardmen players tend to go for that. It'll be also amazing to see Lizardmen in Total War Warhammer, but I don't think we'll anytime soon. But they will make for great DLCs, and I'm pretty sure they'll do it. The fifth of the Winds is Ulgu. It's Lord of Shadows. It's really cool, amazing supportive magic. It's the direct opposite of Light, obviously. And compared to Light, Shadow is extremely proactive, because Light is more supportive. It's, it's like fucking Uther in Heroes of the Storm, like I'll support you with light and make you stronger with light. But Shadow is like directly opposite. It's proactive. It doesn't really buff your units, but it debuffs and taints the enemy units. It weakens them to the point where even the smallest, weakest unit you have can clap down the strong enemy, because they'll be so weak or whatever, they'll be weak. But the ultimate spell of the School of Magic, at least in the tabletop Warhammer, and that's what it's based on, so that's where my knowledge comes from, is the ability to convert your leadership value into strength. Meaning that if you have a well-organized army that has high morale because of their general or whatever, can become extremely strong, because the way that the magic works is, your enemy sees you're basically shadow powered. It's weird, right? It's like, I don't know, like in Game of Thrones, you become this shadowy assassin thing that you're extremely powerful, but, well, you don't get to sleep with the Red Woman, which is a bummer, but, well, you have to live with that, right? It's still, like, just imagine the graphical effects that they could add into the game, where you get, like, shadow powered when you're fucking mage cast like an amazing spell that calls down the fog on the entire battlefield, and there's a lot of possibilities I would love to see, but it's a lot to expect, but it's a big company, it's a big game, might as well, right? Another wind that I want to talk about is Sheesh, and that's like the best lore ever. Is the lore of death. And fuck me. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's one of the most badass and powerful winds you can imagine. It's wizards mastering this lore look not much better than necromancers, but they're much more refined and much more much more powerful, I don't know. Much cooler, I would say. Let's say cooler, because there's benefits to both. The magic revolves around killing single targets, mainly assassinations. You can kill a powerful beast, that's a problem, and you don't really want to face it with your units. Or you can drive your enemy unit crazy, because what your sorcerer will basically do is call down visions of death and terror. Literally, they will look in the face of death, or at least they'll think they do. Because you can call down the image of death, that will scare them to fuck, and they won't even fight you. They will like drop their weapons and run, or drop their weapons and scream in terror when you chop them down. They won't be able to put up a fight, and they reduce attributes like you move slower because you're terrified. Just imagine when you're fighting, you're in a formation, and then in your mind, you're surrounded by death. You look around, everybody's dead, nobody's moving. You start looking around, and then randomly you get a strike, blow into the head from front, because you don't see the enemy. All you see around you is darkness and death. Like, imagine how that must feel. I'm not really good at visualizing stuff, but you get the idea. Just in the game, that's another thing that could look amazing, even though it's kind of happening in your head, but still, There is also very, very nice thing, because every Wind of Magic has like a signature spell, and the smaller supportive roles don't really have them, but the more proactive ones really do. And in the case of Lore of Death, it's the most powerful one and the most cool one. It's called the Purple Sun of Xerius. And the way it is, it's a huge purple globe, sun-like globe. Imagine a purple burning sun moving around the battlefield and killing everything that it gets near. It doesn't burn them, it sucks the souls out of the people or any living creatures. It basically destroys the soul because it sucks it into the void and never lets it out. Basically, you're fucked, right? So just the idea of it is terrifying enough when you see people just fall down and die with nothing being able to save them. In tabletop Warhammer, it's funny because it moves around the battlefield randomly, so you can kill the entire enemy army in a few turns, or you can kill your army, because death doesn't care who you are. You just try to direct the spell, you don't control the spell. So moving forward, there is a seventh wind. It's probably the most known and promoted out of them all, especially in Warhammer Total War. It's Wind of Akshai or Akshay. It's Lore of Fire. It's it's exactly what you see in Vermintide, in Mark of Chaos, in Total War Warhammer. I think you've seen a lot of Total Warhammer, maybe. Well, I don't know. Um, it's it's what you expect and what you know. It's pure damage, fireballs, infernos, firewalls, fire cages. You can visualize it really easy, right? You've got a battlefield, there's a battle raging on, and then you're getting flanked. So what happens? Mage turns around and creates a massive wall of inferno that enemy cannot get through, and then he circles it around, closes them in the inferno, and then squishes them in and burns them all to crisp. It's extremely at least lore wise, spells of that size are extremely exhausting. So they can even kill a caster if he goes too far with it. So obviously there's limitations to what they can do, but they can do a lot. The most powerful wizards are able to pretty much destroy armies, but if you were to push yourself to the limits of your power of killing an entire army, you'll probably die from exhaustion. You just, or you would try to get too much of energy from the magic wind and you would rip yourself to shreds, There's a lot of dangers to it. But yeah, that's basically the magic. You throw fireballs at people, infernos, firewalls, and that's the most iconic school of magic, I would say. And there is also the last, but not least, out of the 8 winds, and it's the Wind of Gur, Lore of Beasts. It's very similar to Lore of Life, but it buffs your allied units more than it focuses on the healing. It's and it's much more beast focused. So you get think of shamans, beastmen, which are basically half beast, half men who praise chaos, and they use that magic because they have shamans. They're not very intelligent, but they're outcasts. So that's like pagans, hiding in forest. That's how you can view them. But yeah, basically when you cast the magic, you get bonuses when you're around animals or you're mounting animals, or if you're a beast, since beastmen use it. Obviously it helps them a lot. It can make you. It's very single target. It can make you into a juggernaut. You can call down of unpenetrable skin of scales, so you're impervious to damage for this turn. You can make yourself have beast claws and just shred an enemy to pieces. You basically can make a small hero, like a normal general of an army who's a normal man. Maybe he's good at sword fighting, but he's not as strong as a chaos warrior or a beast or a dragon. You can basically turn him into someone who can easily stand face to face with them. That's really cheap point wise in the tabletop Warhammer's point of view, and in the cost view of Total War Warhammer, you can just buff him so much, right? And what's also really cool is that the mage himself can turn himself into any monster, the actual monster. He can turn into a hydra, he can turn into a dragon, he can turn into a massive fucking spider or whatever. I think he can, but just imagine any beast, right? Massive. He still regains his health value, the wounds in tabletop Warhammer, but it's much stronger. As I mentioned before, all the winds of magic can be merged back together into Dir, which I think is called different when you merge it back. Actually, it is called different. When Dir splits into 8 streams, and then you're powerful enough to force it back together, it's called High Magic, and it cannot be done by anybody. Only people who can do that, beings, is Slan, who's ancient, and High Elves, who are ancient as a race. This high magic allows you to deal extremely high damage. You can basically imagine a swarm of Skaven. You can you can make them all burn over time. It's a low damage, but it's a high scale damage. So if it's a weak swarm of weak units, they will just die down. You basically burn them down. It's like a perfect mix of everything. Like it brings out the best out of the winds usually. So you have some healing. You've got dispelling, so taking off the effects of like death. So you can take away debuffs or buffs from the others magic. You can destroy the enemy's magical items. So, for example, you have an item that gives you more mana or more power or less of a cooldown or something, and you can just target it and destroy it. You can just blow it up, overload it with power. And you can do some other massive explosion spells. So basically, calling down every element on you and fucking you up. Basically, that's high magic. That's obviously in the tabletop Warhammer, it has to be balanced as well. But lore-wise, is the most powerful magic because it is basically everything in one, and only a few can control it. Well, control is a relative term, like I mentioned before. And these that I mentioned are the accepted by most races schools of magic. For example, humanity. In the Empire, there's a lot of forbidden magic because it's way too dangerous to people, and I'll explain why. Basically, the normal schools of magic are still a big stigma. People don't like sorcerers. They're scared of sorcerers because they're dangerous, and you never know when they're gonna blow up themselves, their workshop, the city, the farm, or whatever, or just disappear or turn into chaos, become heretics. So it's a very very difficult topic. It's not really accepted, but Empire learned to use them because they need them to stand against all the odds. And there's the forbidden schools of magic are forbidden to stop power-hungry people becoming too dangerous. For example, one of the most hated and the most used undercover lords of magic, underground lords of magic, is necromancy. And necromancy is not just a small thing like you've got in Oblivion or Skyrim, where they raise a few zombies or something or go grave digging, right? What they do is that's their tests, that they have their test subjects, they dig graves and all that stuff. But basically, what they can do is it is like a corrupted chain of the wind of death, and they're used from if you're powerful enough necromancer, and there are in history, and I might make a video on the necromancy alone because there's so many powerful necromancers and their stories are so interesting. Just from the lores of Gotrek and Felix from the books, there is necromancer can basically call upon countless legions of not undead, dead warriors. Basically, they come out of their graves, pick up their weapons, and mindlessly move forward. They still have some of their skill when they were alive. You can call it a muscle memory, right? So you've got better and worse warriors, but they never get tired. You cannot really kill them. You have to destroy them to the point that they cannot fight, because if there's a hand is gonna be still flopping around, They don't care. There's so many of them. If you have a river that they cannot cross, they'll just walk into it until enough of them die that you can cross over the dead bodies. And they'll build war machines out of the dead bodies and bones that will be connected together by dark magic. That's the thing you're facing. Basically, if there's a powerful enough necromancer who has a massive army, he's unstoppable. Because imagine that, like, for example, in Gotrek and Felix, right? This book, that's my favorite series, and I really recommend this saga. There's a necromancer who made an army, and then he started marching from village to village, killing all the villagers. What happens? His army size increases. The Empire County, whichever he's in, let's say Middenheim, right? It's one of the districts, sends units to investigate why the people are dying. So they stumble upon the army of undead. So what they do, they fight them off to protect the people. half of them die, they kill some of the undead or whatever, and the half that were killed turn around to attack their allies because they are being revived. The graveyards get up, their own family members get out of the graves to kill their own, right? That's terrifying. They don't need to eat, they don't need to sleep, they just march and fight and never get tired. If you ever did sword fighting or war and armor, you know how fast you get tired. Only thing that keeps you going is adrenaline, but that will run out. They don't. They will just keep coming at you non-stop, so they're unstoppable. And the only way to stop them is to kill the necromancer. So basically, once you kill the necromancer, all the magic is dispelled because there's no one to channel it, and everything pretty much, turns to dust. They all fall down. There's no more dead army because they're not intelligent beings. You cannot talk to them. They're not zombies. They're corpses that are animated by dark magic and the will of a necromancer, and up to the point when they can control insects and insect swarms. So if you cannot get to the keep because the walls are too high and you don't have enough undead, you just take care of the enemy with mosquitoes by spreading disease. That's the easiest way you can do it, right? That's how terrifying it is. So that's why people of the Empire fear it, because if you're powerful enough, you can unnoticed make huge trouble, and it will require a lot of effort to get rid of you. Really, really, really ridiculous. And it's very similar for vampires. The vampires are technically undead because they're immortal, but they can be killed. Basically, they are necromancers of some sort. They're necromancers or they can raise their legions, but vampires are slightly different. They're like royalty of the undead. They're like the main vampires. I think like in Warhammer, you've got the lords and vons and barons and all that shit. Because they're royalty, they create their legions, they create their followers by biting them, but they come from the ancient vampire bloodlines, and that's very important for them. I'll probably make a video because that's a very important lore, and it's very, very interesting as well. It's like Dracula basically, but better. But even though this one is one of the most feared by the people and by the state, there's something that's even more forbidden, and it's the chaos magic, the actual pure chaos magic. It comes straight from the pure winds of magic, and winds of magic come from chaos, and the chaos gods are chaos, right? So obviously they have their own powerful magical characteristics. Depending on what each of the gods represent, that is represented in his lore. So his followers can cast the spells from his school, and that's basically how it works. And let's talk about the schools. We've got 4 of them. We've got Slaanesh, Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Khorne. But Khorne isn't really a magician. I'll talk about it a little bit later. They manipulate their own pawns, which are sorcerers. They use them to spread whatever they feel necessary or fun. They like to amuse themselves. It's funny because they want to sow despair everywhere. They want to destroy humanity, but they don't need it to win. They don't give a fuck. They could if they wanted to, but they like to amuse themselves, so they need enemies. It's like Batman and Joker. Like Joker needs Batman, and Batman technically needs Joker. That's the funny part. Or even in Warhammer, the hunter needs Illidan, and Illidan actually doesn't need a hunter, fuck it. But when the hunter cannot hunt Illidan, then she loses the meaning of her life, basically. That's kind of how it works. So they need humanity to attack them constantly, but they want humanity to survive up to some point. Otherwise, they would have already destroyed it because they're extremely powerful. Basically, let's talk about Khorne first, because he's the easiest to explain. He's not really a magic god. He hates magic. He hates range units. He hates honor. He focuses on melee, fight, and blood. All he expects from his champions and warriors is go, kill, and spill blood in the name of Khorne. And what he will do is he will reinforce them against magic and against missiles and against all that bullshit, because he wants them to have a fair fight and win with brute strength. No strategy, just run at them and kill everything. If you die, the better. You die for Khorne. You spill blood for Khorne. If it's yours or theirs, doesn't matter. That's how Khorne works, and he loves it. He provides buffs, obviously, like melee. They're stronger. They have bigger muscles and all that stuff. But that's not really magic. It's like a blessing of Khorne more, and the trinkets and artifacts that protect from magic. And as a second one, let's put the direct opposite of Khorne, Tzeentch. And Tzeentch is hated by Khorne, because Tzeentch is the master of strategy, of being sneaky. He likes to weave his subtle plans and deceptions and use extremely powerful magic to infiltrate the enemy lines, to control the enemy leaders, to control the traders, because it's all in a medieval setting, remember. So all the traders are very important, right? They have money. So Tzeentch likes to control them to amuse himself, basically. And he loves powerful magic. So if you have a power-hungry sorcerer that's really, really skilled, Tzeentch will find a way to get to him, show him what real magic can be used to. Because obviously the human mages don't know all the power, because people are too scared to give them all the possible power, because they could take over the country. But Tzeentch will open ocean of new possibilities, and they'll usually go for it. He'll offer them mutations, he'll offer them more power, they'll, glory, all that shit. So he's extremely dangerous, because if he wants someone exposed, he will be exposed. The Tzeentch is, I don't know if you saw the Total War Warhammer trailer, but basically the sorcerer that looks at the book and sees what's happening, and then at some point the book starts corrupting him and he turns blue, and then there's this massive bird-like demon showing up. This bird-like demon is the icon of Tzeentch, and basically he's showing this mage what's happening, and the mage is looking through the book to find a solution, right? He's looking for powerful magic, and Tzeentch is a perfect opportunity to show him what he's capable of, and he corrupts him, and he instantly changes his mind just like that. I would snap my fingers, but I really can't do it, so don't count on it. Yeah, that's basically what it does. And the nice part about Tzeentch magic is extremely powerful, and the way it works, the wizard can basically rip a barrier in between our world and the Chaos world. So basically he will open a vortex portal that will suck in everybody standing around it, killing them, or just mutate them horribly. It's like radiation, just exposing them to it. So it's really terrifying. They can rain a blue fire of Tzeentch on the enemies, who will burn them and will never die out, or a pink demonic fire who will corrupt and kill, and reinforce demons. That's basically how it works. Chaos gods love their demons, so basically I'll talk about it in a different video again, but they can call in demons, and every demon for every god is specific to him, and it's very interesting. Next god is Nurgle. Nurgle is one of my favorite gods, actually, because it's funny. It's really disgusting. It's the god of diseases and rot, and like the spores on your body and things leaking out of it. You smell like shit, basically. It's all the worst thing, and that's the nearest to the Skaven plague monks and all that plague culture. And Nurgle basically allows his followers to mutate, and it's not just any mutations. Some, like Tzeentches, are subtle, like a third eye, all-seeing eye, that's very popular. Khorne, you're a massive muscle mass, or like a claw instead of a hand, But Nurgle is different. He's called, is it called Grandpa Nurgle? I think. And he will give you a massive buff. You're basically immortal, right? But you start rotting inside and outside. You get a massive belly full of bodily fluids you never even heard of. You're gonna have open gushing wounds, gushing blood everywhere, but it won't affect you. You won't feel pain, you won't die, you'll be pretty much a walking corpse, but sane walking corpse compared to zombies. Um, you, it's very visible if you follow Nurgle, so it's really hard to hide your intentions. But imagine an army or a soldier that comes at you. You cannot even look at him because you cannot stand his smell. He has a horn popping out of his head, massive belly hanging down, full of something that reeks so terrifyingly that you cannot even hold your shield up because you need to cover your face not to pass out. That's how bad it is. And then you stab him, open another gushing wound who smells even badly, melds your sword, and then he just smashes you down because you cannot do anything to him and he doesn't even feel pain up to this point. That's basically Nargle. He can heal. That's the best part. He can heal all your diseases. He can save your life, but he'll take the life, and you will never be normal again. And normal is, I suppose, relative term, but you can imagine. And then there is the fourth god and the most fun god, Slaanesh, or Slaanesh. I don't know. I call him Slaanesh. It's god of sex and pleasure, or how Tyrion will call him, the god of tits and wine. That's basically him. It sounds amazing, and it is amazing. I cannot argue that. Slaanesh loves distributing pain and pleasure at once. It's like the BDSM stuff. He's killing the enemies while the enemy basically begs him for more. The way he does it is his followers are the masters of pleasuring themselves and others with orgies and with pain and suffering, but it's so amazing that people want more. It's all based on psychology and all that stuff. That's why it's very popular cult amongst the young royalty of Empire, because that's cool. Basically about what you heard, it sounds like a pretty good god to follow, right? Out of them four, and that's what people are thinking. But it's not as simple, because it's still Chaos God. He doesn't really care for war. He cares about spreading his pleasures and all that stuff. So yeah, that's how it works. Like, his demons are known for having a third tit or something. It's like the more the better. But whatever. It's the soldiers, and the bonuses of the soldiers are being immune to fear, because what is there to fear for? They love pain, they want pain, and they're faster, they get to enemies faster, and that's basically like a very supportive magic again, but it's very, very useful, very, very funny. And his color is obviously pink. What would you expect, right? These are like the most popular lores, the main lores of magic, but certainly not the only ones. We have to remember that, for example, when you think about orcs, they're way too primitive to master winds of magic, and they rely on two of their gods, Gork and Mork. And like everything, they're very simple. Gork is a massive orc, like a war boss, and Mork is a small sneaky goblin that uses Gork for his advantage. And they're respectively called the Big Wa for Gork and the Little Wa for Mork. I'll not dwell into explaining what the orcish religion or beliefs are like, but like I said, Gork and Mork reflect goblins and orcs. The bigger, the stronger, the better. That's the orcish way, and the more magic reflects that. It's unstable, it's dangerous, but it deals direct brute damage, or it adds fury to you. So you want to go in, smash, kill, and do that. And that's basically Gork's magic. You've got Hand of Gork and all that shit, so whatever. And then there's Mork, which reflects the values of goblins who want to backstab you, use the stronger people to fight for them. So obviously Mork works more on the basis of offensive support. He would not really buff you, but debuff the enemy, decrease their luck, and make you faster. It's basically all the backstabby ideas to the win. For example, the enemy will be weak enough so the swarm of goblins can stab them to death, more easily. and so they can get outswarmed. And that's basically the orc magic. It's very simple. You've got shamans for orcs who weave it, and then you've got goblin shamans who are all very it's a very funny magic, because imagine how very disciplined and educated sorcerers in Warhammer can blow up the entire city and kill everything. Imagine if a fucking orc with a stick starts casting magic. There's there's enough greenskins to survive that, but it must be ridiculous when you think about it. And another discipline that I haven't mentioned yet is the ones that I mentioned but I haven't talked about it, is the one that used by Skaven. It's powered with the warp stones, as I said, and the Grey Seers use and weave magic. They are the smarter ones of the flock, and they are highly respected in their respective cities, because they have underground cities. So they pretty much all know each other, and they have like Grey Seer councils, so they're like pretty much leading the flock. Their magic will either try to inflict plague and sickness, like Nurgle, or they will just actually it'll be very direct way of destroying something enemy has, because destruction is what they want, what they love. And since their main focus is on the warpstone energy, it's very important to get warpstone. So there's entire thing of Mordheim, which is Vermintide. It's basically Mordheim is Skaven fighting with everything to get more warpstone. They love their warpstone. I'll talk about it as well, but basic warpstone is very important. It's like the magical trinket for them, and they power their engines with it as well. They don't rely on magic as much as they rely on their warpstone guns and cannons and all that shit, but magic is still very important. You cannot dismiss that. I'm not sure how it will be in game, and it's probably not worth mentioning them because I doubt they'll be in the game, but I'll mention it. There's an Egyptian-like race, which is skeletons. Skeleton race is a long dead race that has been revived, and they're called Tomb Kings. You've got basically pharaohs leading their armies that have been revived, and they use something of a mix of magic of death and necromancy, because they basically boost their troops, make them faster, move around. They're all immune because they're dead, and they're raise their troops. Basically, it's really cool army. You have to look at it to understand how they look, get the feel of them. There hasn't anything been mentioned about them, so I don't know if they'll come into the game, because it's pretty hard to fit them lore-wise, why they're there. But yeah, basically that's it. Lastly, there's also lore of ogres, which also probably won't be mentioned, but it's like a simplistic brute magic who's like a gut magic, like a shaman throwing around bones to tell the fortune or the gods or whatever. You know how it works. That's basically what it is. It's very similar to orcish magic. It gives you pretty much strength buffs, and is like a very primitive. That's basically it. There is also a lore that I haven't mentioned yet, and now that I think about it, it might be important for the DLC, because in the Mark of Chaos DLC, Dark Elves came out, right? And Dark Elves use very unique magic, which is a mix of magic of death and shadow and a little bit of metal. It's lore of darkness. It's their own magic. Their god is Cain, god of war, and he also, wants blood. They love their slaves, their sex slaves, and all this other stuff. It's like a mix of Slaanesh, darkness, death, and all that good stuff, basically, that's what they use, and they have very powerful spells, very powerful supportive spells, like you have Blade of Storms spinning around the enemy that stabs them around and basically kills him. You've got the massive buffs to speed, to strength, to shoot faster, to shoot better, and debuffing the enemy, and it's very violent magic, but also very subtle one. That's what they do. They love their slaves, they love their slave works, they love their pretty much pit fights. They're elves, but they're fallen elves, and they have a lot of beef with high elves, obviously, because it's the same race, but they turned against them, and I'll probably make another video about it sometime later. And there is really not much more to it. That's all the lores. I only nibbled a little bit of them because obviously there's much more to it when you actually read the lore, and I know much more, but I just wanted to make a relatively quick video, just give you an overview of how magic works and how it is very iconic to every different race and every different wind. I don't think it will go that in depth in Total War Warhammer because, well, let's get to it. People are not that interested. But if it ever comes to it, or if you want to know how the magic works, if you care, that's I think that's a really good guideline. And I'll probably post my notes about it, so you can just look through them and quickly remind yourself. So if you need that, just let me know and I'll send it to you. And yeah, I'm still working. Just recorded this video. I'm tired as fuck, and probably next week I'll release another lore video. Not sure what it will focus on. It'll probably now focus on the specific factions to give you some overview, but since you know how magic works, it will make it much easier to explain a lot of things. And so far, I hope you enjoy, and yeah, see you in the next one.